Welcome to today's edition of The Verdict. This is a governance issue that talks about national matters to do with the electoral process in this election year. As you are aware, Zambia will be going to the polls on the August 12. So a number of programs have been lined up on this platform to ensure that we give you, our viewers, information in as far as holding the election is concerned. Our preoccupation is to ensure that we create a platform for all stakeholders in the electoral process and all those aspiring to be candidates as council chairpersons, councillors, members of parliament. We are giving you a platform to sell your manifestos, your ideas, and how you'd want to represent the people when you are given a mandate post the August 12 general elections. Now, on today's edition of The Verdict, we are also discussing another interesting topic of discussion, election monitoring. And this is amidst the cyber laws that came into force. And my guest on the program today is coming from the Zambia Institute of Governance and Civil Liberties and Advocacy Platform, ZCLAP in short. And his name is Mr. Francis Chipiri. Mr. Francis Chipiri, kindly introduce yourself and what you do at the ZCLAP, and what is ZCLAP all about?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm so honored to be here. So basically, ZCLAP is a non-governmental organization registered under PACRA. We undertake advocacy in terms of governance and promotion of good governance, democracy. We also undertake activities in youth empowerment, particularly in the rural parts of the country. So basically, we are more like, a watchdog, if you wish. We provide governance issues, advice to government. We also watchdog in the sense that we also pay particular attention to the private sector in terms of matters that affect citizens' economic affairs as well as social affairs. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what ZCLAP does.
Well, our dear listeners, we thank you for being part of the program. You can also contribute on this platform. We'll be opening up the phone lines on the numbers that will be scoring on your screens. And so that you can also give us your views and contribution on the topic of discussion. Now, as we get into the nitty-gritties of the program, who is, first of all, Mr. Francis Chipiri? What is your background in the civil society movement?
Wow, in the civil society movement, my background basically is management. But prior to that, I was involved in labor issues when I worked in the hospitality industry. So I think from that background gave me an understanding of advocacy for citizens' rights in terms of labor laws and also civil rights. So generally, that's what I am.
Okay, you are the executive director at the organization.
Yes.
So basically, what, in terms of operations of your organization, what role are you going to be playing in this year's election, and how are you mobilizing resources to be part of this important process?
Well, given the topic that we are discussing, which is a very important topic, elections monitoring, at ZCLAP, we undertake various activities. We do citizens education. We sensitize them on their rights. For instance, during the voters registration, we're undertaking various activities, especially in the rural parts of the country, encouraging citizens to go out there and register as voters. We also try and educate citizens and highlight their civic rights so that they are not manipulated. As you know, the activities of elections monitoring is not a one-way-off thing. It's an ongoing exercise, because basically elections monitoring is the process of activities that protects the tools of governance, constitutionalism, as well as democracy. And so those activities are not activities that you undertake once and you forget. It's an ongoing. So we've been doing a lot of pre-election monitoring. especially in terms of trying to see that citizens or the processes are not manipulated by the politicians or other interest groups, both locally as well as internationally. As you know, in the recent times, we've seen various countries getting interested in other countries' electoral process or elections. Some countries tend to interfere in other countries' elections. So as citizens, we have a duty to ensure that we protect our democracy and also the integrity of our electoral processes.
But in the case of Zambia, are we seeing any foreign interference in our elections?
Of course, I mean, there's obviously some sort of interference that, you know, obviously you cannot see from there, but there's always interest. Zambia is endowed with a lot of natural and mineral resources that international organizations and countries are interested to come and explore and exploit. And for them to do that or to have access to our resources, they need to work with particular organization in terms of political parties. And so you find that international investors or other countries, they tend to select which kind of you know, or political party would work in the base of their interests. And so that's when the interest comes in. We've seen some foundation, you know, international foundation organization that are showing interest in our election and trying to influence the outcome of our elections. So those are things that we remain watchful so that we protect the integrity, so that the people of Zambia are the only entitled citizens that have the right to actually determine who governs and runs and controls the wealth as well as the mineral resources that our country is blessed with.
But is that the reason why we saw the formation of the Democracy and Motherland Defenders Coalition?
Yes, that's part of one of the reasons. As you know, as a country, we need a patriotic citizenry, citizens that are interested in the governance of the country, citizens that are proud and take interest and protect the welfare of the country from exploitation by foreign forces. So yes, that was one of our, among others, motivating factors in formation of that coalition, so that, you know, in numbers there's that synergy that you create, and also to try and help each other understand governance issues.
While we are still on that subject, you haven't been specific in terms of who would be interested in terms of taking interest in Zambia's elections, because maybe we see things that as ordinary citizens may not see. Are you able to bring us to speed to say there are some interest groups that are trying to hijack the elections or try to maneuver here and there? But are you able to pinpoint, and how are you working towards mitigating that, based on what you have explained?
Yes, I wouldn't say necessarily trying to hijack, but obviously there are certain interest groups that are interested in, you know, influencing the outcome or who wins the general elections in August. That is a fact. They are there. I cannot obviously name them here, but there are a lot of international organizations, private multinational corporations that are financing dark corner or private meetings that are aimed at you know, scheming and determining who governs our country after August 12th. Also, there are some countries that are interested, you know, through their various representatives. They make various statements in order to, you know, mind conditioning of the citizens. And we are paying particular attention to such maneuvers. As you know, based on you know, our topic this evening of you know, election monitoring, as you know, monitoring, there's you know, there's the monitoring aspect of it, as well as the observation aspect of it in the electoral processes. So generally, you find that citizens are the only ones that are entitled to monitoring the elections. International interest groups must come in as observers. Basically, they come and witness what the Zambian people are doing, what the Electoral Commission of Zambia are doing, what our politicians are doing, and they cannot intervene. Whereas we, the citizens, as monitors, only the citizens can be monitors. We, the citizens, as we undertake various monitoring activities, we can move in and, demand recourse to certain malpractices in the processes, whereas international observers, the only thing is they can observe and document things that they see that they are not being done properly. So that's the difference between the monitors as well as the observers.
Now that brings me to another interesting issue. What has been your recommendation to the Electoral Commission of Zambia when it comes to the aspect of election observers coming from abroad, knowing that this is a time we are also having the COVID-19 pandemic? What are your recommendations as an organization to the Electoral Commission of Zambia?
Well, as from ZCLAP, as well as the Democracy and Motherland Defenders Coalition, we had made recommendation that the Electoral Commission of Zambia should limit the number of international observers that they accredit to come and observe our election, not because we don't promote democratic practices, but because we are alive to the fact that COVID is real, and some of the observers will be coming from from countries that have high incidence of coronavirus, and so we cannot risk the citizens' lives at the expense of democracy. So we have to be real and true to ourselves. And we're still appealing to the Electoral Commission of Zambia to take that into consideration. We've known Asian countries, for instance, we've seen how India has been devastated with the second and third wave of coronavirus, and we can never allow ourselves to be naive and think that we are promoting democracy by endangering the lives of the citizens in the name of encouraging as many observers to come and witness the August 12th election. So we have to strike a balance between democracy, good health, and the general welfare of the citizens.
But others have argued to say you can put in place COVID-19 guidelines. For example, they recommended 14 days mandatory quarantine where people can come, they are observed and checked to say not until they are considered COVID-free, they are able to even now be able to undertake their various activities. Now, what about that aspect? Are you also taking that into perspective as you made that recommendation as well?
Yes, of course. But when you consider international travel is not as simple as that, because when citizens are moving from one country to another, some of them, they have lay-by flights where they transit in other foreign countries, and so the 14 days they could have contracted the virus in transit, and when they land in Zambia, and you find that and within that period of 14 days, the virus has not manifested in them. So it's a tricky situation, so we cannot take that risk. Yes, we need to have international observers, but at the same time, we cannot be naive and encourage a mass exodus of international observers to come and be part of our election and observing. So that's what I'm saying. We need to strike that balance. The Electoral Commission of Zambia need to represent the Zambian people and do the right thing by ensuring that the numbers, obviously, promote the adherence to the COVID-19 guidelines as provided by the Ministry of Health.
Well, our dear listeners, in case you are just joining us, you are watching The Verdict, and we are discussing election monitoring. And this topic of discussion, we also look at the aspect of cyber laws. Now, still on the aspect of the cyber laws, Mr. Chipiri, yes, would want to get your perspective to say, first of all, we want to understand, are you going to be doing a parallel voter tabulation as an organization?
As the Democrats and Motherland Defenders, we had a press briefing, and I'm sure your platform was invited, in which we announced that we shall deploy about 2,000 election monitors. And so there are certain things that we are putting in place in order to give credibility to the results of the August 12th. And one of those things are, tabulating the results, and many other things that I cannot really disclose now because we are still in the process of fine-tuning on how, as a consortium of the coalition of independent organizations, work together in order to ensure that we promote transparency and integrity over the results of the August 12th elections.
In terms of targeting for people who will be part of your program, how is your targeting? What is your focus in terms of what criteria are you using to come up with people to participate in your activities?
So generally, these are Zambian citizens. That's the number one thing. And obviously, they have to be, able to read and write, meaning that they have to have at least at a very minimum a grade 12 certificate. I don't know if I should say or equivalent, but it's generally just a grade 12 certificate. And mostly would want to work with college students, because I'm sure most of them, they won't be in school, and it will be an opportunity for them to get some, work experience. So it's another way of empowering them with the skills and being involved in governance issues, trying to educate the young people so that they take an interest in the running of our country and also in the governance issues.
Well, we are discussing election monitoring. You can also participate on the program by dialing the number that is scrolling on your screens to provide your comments or any clarity on the topic of discussion. You can equally participate just by dialing that number. You can also, if in case you are joining us via our social media platform that is on Facebook, you can equally participate on the program by leaving a comment there on our platform, that's on the Camnet TV Facebook page. We are discussing election monitoring, and my guest is coming from Zaglep and is the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Francis Chipiri. Mr. Francis Chipiri, we also want to understand the coalition. Who is funding the coalition?
Well, we have some well-wishers that would want to promote good governance in Zambia. Of course, I cannot disclose the finances. And for instance, ZClub is registered under PACRA. We did that in order to, move away from the traditional financing model of non-government organization entities where they depend on donor funding. So we do other activities such as entrepreneurship and trying to run an business, private businesses that help to finance our advocacy activities. So yes, so other organizations, they have also other mode of which they raise their finances. But ZClub generally is as registered by PACRA. We can run private enterprises, although whatever money is made is the property of the Zambian people. So any assets that ZClub accumulates, for instance, tomorrow ZClub is dissolved, those assets are declared and they become property of the Zambian people. So that's the model, that's the financing model that we undertook.
Now, I understand now, coming to the issue of civil society organizations, we have seen some sort of differences where we see civil society organizations on the other side and these other civil society organizations on the other side. And people have been asking questions to say, are you being supported by political parties? Like, for example, others would argue to say this coalition is being supported by the PF. Others would say these other people, these other civil society organizations are being supported by the UPND. When, depending on how someone comes out on the subject, of matter, especially on topical national issues. So I want to get your perspective. Are you privy to such information that has been going around?
I mean, obviously, we, as ZClub, as the Zambian Institute of Governance and Civil Liberties Advocacy Platform, we get attacks from time to time, depending on the position that we take on any given topic. So, for instance, if we criticize the opposition, then the opposition will unleash, different kinds of attacks on us. If we, provide checks and balances to the government of the day might not be happy with us. So, as a civil society, we know our objective for as long as we are promoting good governance. And good governance does not just mean that we provide the checks and balances just to the government of the day. We provide checks and balances both to the opposition. We also provide the checks and balances to the private sector. Like, for instance, there's been issues of, in the agriculture sector where there's been a lot of manipulation of the value chain in the livestock and poultry sector. Those are issues that we take interest in. So if we speak against those, obviously the players in those sectors, they will definitely attack us. And likewise, if that is directed at the opposition will talk negatively against us. But that does not discourage us from, undertaking those works of providing checks and balances so that the people of Zambia are not manipulated or taken advantage of.
One other interesting subject is the issue of cyber laws that were recently enacted by the government. Now, on this subject, you've also taken a position as an organization. In fact, before the cyber laws were enacted, you actually came out to say these laws are progressive and should be supported by all well-meaning Zambians. Yes. Now, I want to find out on as you conduct various election monitoring activities, people are afraid to say the cyberspace is being shrinked, it is being limited. But according to your assessment, as those amongst organizations that have been advocating for this law, do you think the cyber security law will hinder citizens' freedoms of expression, just based on your analysis and how you have observed this law?
Not at all. The Cyber Security and Cybercrime Act 2021 will not at all, shrink the space that both the politicians as well as ordinary citizens, have in terms of, especially in relations to the August 12th elections. When you look at this bill, the bill is actually in parts. So there's a part of cybercrime, and when you analyze the first part of the act, actually it talks about what is this act for, and the establishment of the relevant institutions that will ensure that that will implement this act. And then the other part which talks about the cyber crimes. For instance, in that part, there's a part that talks about child protection. Mm-hmm. In terms of child trafficking, in terms of, it talks about soliciting of a child, and then goes deeper and talks about, for instance, child pornography. It talks about soliciting sex with a minor and things like that. These are laws that are already in the books of the Zambian laws, but now they are taking a different perspective or context. They are being broadened to cover the criminalities that can occur in the cyberspace. Generally, Zambia is an emerging technology-consuming country, and some of these things were not catered for. And it's only prudent that you expect a caring government to enact such kind of a law that protects the citizens. There's another particular aspect that interested me in the cyber crimes. We talks about electronic interference. And I think that responds also to the elections. Mm-hmm. I think we had a case in 2016 of interference with the, computers and things like that. But that law is curing that, where if somebody intercepts the transmission of any electronic messages, they commit a law and they're punishable according to the prescribed laws. So it's not going to shrink the space, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Of course, we encourage citizens to actually take interest and read it, so that instead of politicizing it, it's better to be well informed, because most of the things that are in the Act, they are already existing in other books. The only thing is an extension to the cyberspace, which of course, the utilization of the technology, cyberspace, is on the increase, and it's not something that the Zambian people say they can do without, because technology is part of us. And look at what technology has done in this COVID-19. Without technology, most of the economies, most of the countries would have come to the halt. But because of the utilization of technology, our lives have continued. And so it's only important that we respond to the threats. The other threats, the other aspect of the act is, acts of terrorism, that the threats of terrorism. That's what this act is responding to. And in modern society, with the various interest groups that are interested in other nations' either resources or land, or harboring, training other criminal elements, terrorism is a real threat to globally. And so Zambia is not an island. Zambia is not isolated, and Zambia must take precautions and protect itself from threats of terrorism. And there are issues of cyberbullying, there are issues of financial crimes that have been responded to in the act. So those are things that we call them progressive, because they respond to the current dynamics, in societal dynamics, and we cannot remain ancient. We cannot allow ourselves to remain behind because we are afraid, or because politicians are politicizing the act. And as you know, any law that is enacted in the Republic of Zambia, it passes through Parliament, and it's the duty of parliamentarians to debate adequately and represent their various constituencies. And this is why, as ZIC Club, we've always been encouraging the parliamentarians to stay in Parliament and debate and represent the people of Zambia, rather than the walkouts that we had witnessed, recently. So we encourage parliamentarians to take interest and represent the people of Zambia in their constituencies adequately.
Interesting there. Well, in case you're just joining us, we are discussing election monitoring, and my guest on the program is coming from ZIC Club, and his name is Mr. Francis Chipiri. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the organization. You can also participate on the program by dialing the number that is scrolling on the screens there. And just now, we are going to take a very short break, so that on the other side, we continue with our topic of discussion. Just stay tuned.
The much awaited for CAMNET conference is now scheduled for May 2021 with your hosts, Pastors Victoria and Moses Chiluba.
We have believed that every Zambian was born for greatness, and that you and I can contribute to the development of this nation.
The big questions to ask are: can Zambia develop through agriculture? Can we produce indigenous Zambian millionaires? Plan not to miss this national conference on empowering Zambians through agriculture knowledge. Dates: 28th to 29th May 2021. Time: 0730 hours to 1630 hours. Venue: the Healing Word Ministries International in Ibex Hill. Charges: 950 kwacha, lunch inclusive for both days. Payments through via mobile money on 0962 965 883 or 0979 753 010, or you can pay via Stanbic Bank account number 91 3000 1825 325. Speakers will be Professor Reda.
We need Zambia to be one of the best nations in Africa.
Professor Munkumba.
If you just listen to a lecture, you may remember hardly anything. In 2 weeks' time, it's all gone. If you read, you may remember 10% of what you've read. If you participate in a discussion, 50% retention of the knowledge. So I always tell people, knowledge is the only thing that when you share it, you don't lose it.
Professor Msongole.
Agriculture can actually solve our unemployment for our youth. Through exports, agricultural exports, we can also stabilize our foreign exchange.
Honorable Bobs Chinga.
When you do a budget, you plan it so that all the sectors, especially those that could give you low-lying fruits, in other words, you can achieve a lot with it, are the first things you do first.
And biologist Kamweneshe.
If we came together and put our hands together and concentrate on the soil, the People in Kenya, these Swahili people said, Dongo ni mali, means soil, that's money.
Register your participation through Camnet lines. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We are discussing election monitoring, and my guest on the program is Mr. Francis Chipiri, coming from Z-Club. He is the Chief Executive Officer. Now, on this interesting edition of The Verdict, we are unpacking the aspect of election monitoring. We are also marrying the subject of cyber laws, and Mr. Chipiri has already touched on that important subject. Now, going into still talking about the same cyber laws, who are the possible casualties on this law? We know that every law has merits and demerits, or every law has consequences. What sort of individuals should be afraid of such a law?
I mean, basically, like you said, the casualties, I would say, are those who would be lawbreakers. But, you know, the law is actually meant to deter, you know, such kind of, you know, transgressions. So anyone that breaks the law will be a casualty. But this is why we are recommending for citizens, especially political players, to read it, because they're the ones that have actually politicized it. The ordinary citizens, most of them, if you go to the villages and talk about the cyber security and cyber crime bill, they probably don't care about it because it little affects them. But so mostly the people that should pay particular interest to it and read it are the political players and other interest groups that are taking or participating in governance issues. So just like the other laws that we have in the country, it does not really prescribe who would be, you know, the casualty. The casualties becomes the lawbreakers. If you hit somebody and you cause harm or assault, you are the casualty, and the laws that prescribe the effects of assault will be used to prosecute. So the same concept applies to this act. So for as long as you are a law-abiding citizen who is not involving in child pornography or child trafficking, you are not involved in cyberbullying, you are not involved in cyber extortion. That's another thing that this act talks about. When you talk about the issues of extortion, these things already exist. There are people that have been extorted, you know, without using the cyberspace or technology. But now it's been extended. If somebody gives you a phone call, they send you a text message or an email, and they say, hey, look, or they're trying to blackmail you using technology, and you have sufficient evidence and you can prove in the courts of law that that's a case of extortion, then they can be prosecuted. So this is why we are saying the act is progressive, because it's just an extension of some of the existing laws that governs us, but being extended to encompass or in the cyberspace utilization.
Now, we cannot talk about free and fair elections when there are issues to do with political violence. Now, just like any other elections that we have held as a country, pockets of violence have been recorded. Now, in this election, it seems that it won't be any exception. So just want to find out, as stakeholders monitoring this year's elections and the aspect of violence, what is your take on that?
Well, first of all, as Z Club, as well as the Democrats and Motherland Defenders, we take zero tolerance on political violence or any forms of violence for that matter. The recent events of political violence obviously was unfortunate, and Z Club had issued a statement. The coalition also, the Democrats and Motherland coalition also made a statement on that, and we condemned it in the strongest possible, terms. And we would like to appeal to, first of all, to political parties to find better things for their cadres, their membership to do. For instance, when it comes to the youth, we, political parties can encourage, the formation of skill centers where they can tap into the talent, the natural talent of their young people, instead of using them as tools of political violence. As you know, the major drivers of political violence has been through many studies, both by local as well as international research has been highlighted as being poverty and the high levels of unemployment. And Zambia being a youthful nation with the majority of the population falling in the category of the youth, you find that we have a challenge of creating more jobs for the young people. And so they have ample time, and so politicians tend to take advantage and manipulate them and use them as tools of violence. But we like to appeal to the politicians not to take that route by taking advantage of these disadvantaged citizens by you using them. They need to position them as the people that are going to take over the management and running of this country. When they say the youth are the future leaders, but they are current stakeholders and partners in governance issues. So we appeal to politicians not to manipulate or underutilize the youth, also by using them to commit crimes. We've seen what happened where private property destroyed. Citizens are working very hard to make ends meet, and when you work hard, you want to ensure that your property is well protected. But also we've seen these acts of political violence where public properties have also been destroyed or damaged, and this is a huge cost to the taxpayer. So this is why we appeal to all the stakeholders, citizens, to ensure that we all refrain from the acts of political violence or any other violence for that matter. So going forward, I think free and fair elections, yes, cannot occur when citizens are subjected to intimidations. And as a matter of fact, when you talk about political violence also causes voters apathy, because most citizens get disinterested in participating in the process. They don't go to the polls because they don't know what's going to happen when they go to the polls. So politicians then will start discussing why citizens are not turning up. Citizens are not turning up because the manner in which they conduct prior to the elections discourages citizens. So if you want maximum turnout of the citizens that are registered to vote, we need to ensure that our politics are issue-based. We are discussing issues of ideologies. We are discussing the manifestos, the content of the manifestos. What is it that we are going to offer better? For instance, if it's the opposition, what is it that is contained in their manifestos that will provide better solutions than the current government is offering? And it's for the government, what is it that they're going to do differently to better what they've delivered, or to ensure that whatever they have not delivered, they will deliver. So those are things that we should occupy our time with instead of engaging in violence. Because as you know, violence, political violence, in election years, Zambia is not isolated, like I pointed earlier on, and there are a lot of international stakeholders that pay particular interest in the affairs of Zambia, both socially, economically, and politically. And you find that during elections, especially 2 years prior to elections, international investors, they critically start to keep a critical eye on the country that's going to the election, because international investors tend to be risk averse, meaning that they want to take calculated risk. No one wants to invest in a country that is unstable, a country that is unpredictable. So when pockets of political violence starts to occur, these international investors, they'll start holding off their investments. So the inflow of the forex starts to dwindle. International tourists reduce their arrivals in Zambia, and that's in the short run affects the exchange rate. So this is why for us we take zero tolerance on political violence, because whichever sides is cultivating such acts of anarchy, they are not doing it in the best of interest of the country. They are doing it in order to position themselves so that maybe if the dollar is not doing well, the Zambian people get agitated, they get irritated, so that maybe they rise. And so it's any citizen that is patriotic and they love and loyal to their country, they will do anything in their means to ensure that they position their country positively. And so we condemn any sort of violence, political violence, and scheming to disrupt the free flow of traffic, causing unnecessary congestion is unacceptable. And so we want politicians that are accountable to their actions. We want politicians that are politicking in the best interest of the country rather than positioning for individual access to national authority or power. So basically, going forward, we appeal to all the politicians, both in the ruling party and the opposition, that dialogue is the only way to resolve the differences. We can resolve our differences peacefully.
While we are still on that issue of violence, we've just learned from the Electoral Commission of Zambia that actually young people are the majority in terms of voters in this year's elections. But as a country, have we done enough to ensure that these young people are in majority in terms of voting, are given enough space, one, to participate in the electoral process, as well as a given chance to ensure that they are candidates in the same electoral process. They are also given, they are not also utilized, like you are alluding to, as tools of political violence. How is your assessment on that subject?
Well, this is why, and this is part of our monitoring activities as a club. Basically, yes, as a country, there's an effort in order to give enough space to the young people to participate in our governance issues by, adopting them as candidates, just like there's some effort towards adopting women and other the differently abled citizens. But basically, we are not doing much. This is why, after the adoption process, we want to tabulate and see how many young people below the age of 36 will be adopted by various political parties, and see if we are making positive strides to ensuring that young people are being groomed to take over governance and management of the country. So as Z Club, our position is that we need to do more. We need to ensure that maybe 50% of the young people are adopted, both the women and both females and males are adopted both in local government elections as well as parliamentary positions. So overall, we have not done as it should be. Given that Zambia is a youth population, we need to have more youth representative in all aspects of our country, politically, both in the private sector as well as in these quasi-government institutions, and they need to be given positions that they qualify for. We have a lot of young people that are qualified and capable, more than capable, to run and manage some of our state-owned companies, and also we can provide, to those that are in school, we can provide internship opportunities in order to groom them into responsible citizens rather than utilizing them as tools of political violence. So we'd like to appeal to the leadership, both in government, first of all, the leadership in government, because they have the instrument of powers, to ensure that they put policies and implement them to ensure that the youth are well catered for and they are positioned to take over Zambia to the great heights in the next century.
Interesting. We are discussing election monitoring. My guest on the program is Mr. Francis Chipiri. He is the Executive Director or Chief Executive Officer for Z Club, a non-government organization that focuses on governance issues. Now, remember, The Verdict is a governance program that comes on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday to discuss pertinent issues in as far as national governance is concerned. A number of stakeholders have been brought on this platform to discuss issues pertaining to our governance as a country. We have discussed issues to do with violence on this very platform. This is particularly the subject of violence is of particular interest as a community TV station as well as a Christian TV station. That has been one of our core focus to ensure that we play an active role in ensuring that the country holds free and fair elections ahead of the August 12 polls. So this is a contribution as Kami TV we want to also declare during this year's elections. And a number of governance stakeholders will be brought on this same platform so that they can equally share with the viewers what some of the solutions to ensure that we have credible elections. Candidates also will be offered this platform. Those are councillors, council chairpersons, those aspiring to be leaders as members of parliament across the country are able to utilize this platform to sell their messages as well as engage their electorates on various issues they would want to address when they are given a mandate to be in office, and that's after the August 12 elections. Now, in case you are also joining us, you can also participate on this very platform by dialing the number that is scrolling on your screens. We are discussing election monitoring. Now, Mr. Chipiri, going on with the program, another subject of concern is the issue of the Public Order Act. How would you want the police and the Electoral Commission of Zambia and political parties collaborate in terms of ensuring that the Public Order Act is not used to disadvantage anyone, but ensure that the law is utilized towards the hosting of credible elections?
Yes, the fair application of the Public Order Act is very critical in this election year. It's quite unfortunate that due to politics, the attempts to amend the Public Order Act was actually defeated because of other interest groups thought it was not in the best interest of the country. But quite unfortunate, the same interest groups are now crying foul of police unfairness in the implementation and application of the Public Order Act. At the NDF, I was a delegate, and so we discussed extensively the issues pertaining to implementation and also made a few changes. Generally, the Public Order Act is the piece of legislation that has the support of a cross-section of citizens, both from the ruling as well as the opposition, as well as the non-governmental organization. There was minimal friction in terms of trying to align various clauses in the Act. It's unfortunate that that was not passed because of the failure of Bill 10. But having said that, it's also important that because the application of the Public Order Act is not just a responsibility of the police, where we have the ruling party having responsibility, also the opposition and civil society also, they have a responsibility. We have a role to play, basically. For instance, the police has a duty to ensure that the application of the Public Order Act is done in a fair and impartial manner without favoring any particular political party or groups. Well, as also, it's also important that, for instance, the ruling party also does not take advantage of the fact that, they are in power, and also that the police tends to, favor them. But it's also important to point out that also the opposition also have a responsibility not to provoke the police. They should also adhere to the guidelines that the police provides to them when it comes to, notification of the police of the events that they intend to undertake. But in doing so, the police also, they have to be fair. They have to allow the opposition political parties to gather and mobilize their support. They have to allow legal gathering of citizens, because it's a fundamental right of citizens, freedom to association, freedom of assembly. So those are guaranteed rights that citizens have to enjoy, and the police duty is to fairly apply the Public Order Act. So through dialogue, we can navigate even the current state Public Order Act, even before it's amended. If we genuinely can dialogue as a people and take the interests of the country first, we can navigate it and still be able to conduct meetings without confrontations or without finger pointing that these are being favored or these interest groups are being unfairly treated.
And, when you talk about dialogue, who's supposed to spearhead the dialogue?
Well, dialogue is a two-way thing. Basically, there's nothing like.
There should be someone standing up and reaching out to the others.
Yes, and this is the issue of standing up. Does not really have. You cannot say maybe, for instance, the opposition has a duty to be in the forefront, or maybe the ruling party. But also, in fact, that's a very good question, because now we have the church, who are supposed to be neutral in this aspect of governance. The civil society, they're supposed to provide those checks and balances in an impartial manner. So when the politicians are pulling in different directions, we, the civil society and the church, must come in and maybe be the first to extend that hand that provides and creates the process of engaging in a real dialogue. The challenge we've had is that every time there's been attempts to dialogue, there's been a lot of dishonesty, engagement. People are going into the dialogue process. They are not going there in good faith. There's always politicking, and so this is why all attempts of dialogue have collapsed. And sometimes even the church have been accused of not being fair, because they've sided, which is quite unfair. You'd expect that the church leadership would always be neutral when it comes to issues of dialogue, so that citizens can have confidence. In the last few years, we've had a lot of church leaders that have turned highly political. And so they've made the issue of real dialogue very difficult, because they've taken position, either they are supporting the government of the day or they are supporting the opposition party. And so there's been a lot of mistrust among the political players when it comes to dialogue, because the people that are supposed to provide that neutral platform have failed to provide it by taking partisan positions or favoring or taking biased positions. So dialogue is critical if we are going to continue to position our country and continue to ensure that Zambia remains a beacon of peace, a reputation that we've earned over the years. And so it's important that that reputation is maintained at all costs, and that we continue to be one Zambia, one nation, and people that are in unity. And there's no country in the world that has prospered as a result of antagonistic approach, or as a result of political violence of citizens against one another. No prosperity can come. No, we cannot achieve prosperity if we are fighting among ourselves, because when we fight, other foreign interests will come in and take away our resources, and then we remain impoverished. So it's important that the issue of dialogue is taken very, very seriously by all political players, including the church, the civil society, and ordinary citizens. We must demand real dialogue.
The other latest information we have is that that has been confirmed by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, is that officially we have 19 candidates that have so far been confirmed in terms of participating in this year's general election.
Yeah.
And the number is quite big. And I just want to find out what would be your views in terms of on the aspect of fragmentation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's quite unfortunate that, I mean, we are in a democracy, right? And yes, you expect that citizens are free to, to exercise their right to participate in the electoral processes. But again, when you look at 19, when you have only a chance of one candidate winning the presidential election, I think this is why the issue of alliances comes in. There's a lot of selfishness among political party players, and this is why majority of them, their interest is basically restoring power or self-saving, because if you are saving the interests of the country and you know that you have very minimal chances of actually winning the general election or even attaining 1% of the cast vote, and then why would you go in and try and split the vote? It would be important if political parties, the challenge that we've had is that most political parties have not really identified their ideological beliefs or standing. They have not identified or explained to the Zambian people what is it that they stand for. And this is why we can have 19 candidates. When you look at the countries like the United States of America, yes, they have the two major political parties. They have independent that run, but you can never have 19 candidates standing or vying for presidency. America stands about 370 million citizens, and Zambia we're talking about 18, and you have 19 presidential candidates. That's of great concern. Politicians need to start aligning ourselves, trying to help the citizens and understand what is it that we want to achieve. When you look at the Patriotic Front, it's based or hinged on socialist fundamental principles. When you look at the UPND, it's more of capitalistic.
But the PF and the UPND are more capitalistic in nature compared to the real socialists that is led by Comrade Fred Membe. Yes,
Comrade Fred Membe is the only one who has taken that radical socialist position. But when you look at the Patriotic Front is more of a blend of socialism and capitalism, whereas the UPND tend to be more of over 70% of their policies are pure capitalistic in nature. They are promoting, when you read the UPND's current manifesto, and when you listen to the speeches that were done yesterday, at the formation of the new alliance, you find that there's promotion of a lot of promotion of international organization to come and run the affairs of our economy. When you listen to Honorable Mtati's speech, basically is calling upon the international investors to come in and, which for us as Z Club, we would like to promote the ownership of the economy by the locals. So this is why we tend to, to push for entrepreneurship skills, so that when when the Zambian people own the economy, the issues of flight risk of international investors, when they make their money. For instance, when you look at the mining sector, they are selling their mines outside Zambia, and majority of the money remains offshores, and then whatever they bring in is just to come and meet administrative costs, salaries, wages, and payment of suppliers, who for the most part their payments are actually delayed.
Yes. So in other words, you are actually confirming to state to say if political parties continue with the concept of capitalism, it will be actually impossible for Zambians to truly be fully participants of the local economy.
No, not exactly. I mean, when you look at most countries, generally, there's nothing like pure capitalism or pure socialism, because even in the most capitalist society like the United States of America, there's still some aspect of socialism. For instance, United States provide socialist kind of services to its citizens. They're providing housing, they are subsidizing, they're providing meal coupons to low-income bracket citizens. That is kind of socialist services. So the same thing happens in Zambia. We have the means of community development going in villages and trying to help out citizens that are underprivileged. So what we need in Zambia is a good blend of both capitalistic as well as a socialist concept. Now, what happens, like for instance, when we try to analyze the position of, for instance, the UPND, theirs is pure trying to bring in majority of international multinational corporation to come and take over our economy in terms of setting up their operations in Zambia, as opposed to promoting ownership or creation of, for instance, the agro-processing sector, having Zambians running those industries, the agriculture sector. Zambia, majority of the Zambian citizens are employed in the agriculture sector, and naturally you'd think that any political party would promote policies that will ensure that they don't bring in a lot of industrial farms, if you wish. Because when you have a lot of industrial farms, that means they're taking away, they start competing with the small and medium-scale farmers, and so they are reducing the market share. Although these industrial farms, actually, they tend to create a lot of barriers for small and medium farmers that have limited capital to compete with them. And this is also happening in other sectors of the economy. We've had cases of, for instance, in the oil marketing value chain, we've had truck drivers.
We have a caller. Hello, where are you calling us from? Hello, you are through to Camnet. May we have your name and where you are calling us from?
Yes, good evening. How are you?
Okay, we have lost that one.
Okay.
You can proceed.
Yes, I was trying to cite an example of where we have had cases of...
Okay, we have another caller. May we have your name and where you are calling us from?
Okay, I'm Simpo Ngube Banda from Kabwe.
Okay, we seem to be having a technical challenge. Well, Mr. Chipidi, before we were interrupted, we have the call we wanted to pick up. You were discussing, we were analyzing capitalism,
yes,
and talking about
socialism.
A blend, yes, of capitalism and socialism would work better. Now, what concept of socialism and concepts of capitalism should be blended to ensure that we come up with a better concept that would ensure that Zambians benefit in as far as the national governance is concerned?
I think when you look at the current trend of global trade, obviously globalization, although globalization is not a new phenomenon, it's been there for many years. Just that with the arrival of technology, globalization has been out there, and Zambia is not isolated. Zambia needs to trade with other countries, both within the region as well as at the global market. But now, when you look at global trade, Zambia has not done much in terms of protecting the local industry. I know those pure capitalists will say, no, we cannot implement protectionism kind of policies, but there's no country that does not protect its industries. So what we need to do is we need to strike a balance. Instead, there are certain times that our government has made pronunciations that, for instance, they will say we are banning the importation of potatoes from the regional markets.
Yeah, recently we even had the issue of onions.
Yes, which promotes local markets, but sometimes you don't need to make such pronouncements. What you do is you hike on the tariffs, so that you discourage the importation, because Zambian farmers are more than capable to produce onions and potatoes. And we've seen there's been a lot of various interest groups, the trade border, cross-border associations, there's the fresh fruit and vegetables associations, and each one's pulling different directions. But generally, when you review that, you find that Zambia has more than enough farmers that are able to produce onions and potatoes. What happens that they get, for instance, they get discouraged because there's a lot of imported onions, and then they start competing with them. So you find that imported onions becomes cheaper, or imported potatoes becomes cheaper. And also the issue of making sure that there's capacity building in terms of processing. Our onions, our farmers have little capabilities to process the onion. They're still using old technology in the curing of onions. They are using, for instance, the old method they used to be in the curing of tobacco, whereas the onions that is coming from South Africa goes in a vacuum, and much of the moisture is taken out of the onion, so the onion can last longer. It's got a longer shelf life.
Okay. As we come towards the end of the program, Mr. Chipidi, kindly just avail us with your last word, as well as how important is stakeholder collaboration towards hosting free and fair, credible elections.
Yes, thank you very much. My last words will be an appeal to both political parties, both in the ruling party, also in the opposition, that they must always take the interests of the country first. And they are going into the parliament to be dissolved in a few days, and so campaigns will be full-fledged. And we appeal to all political parties to ensure that they engage in issue-based campaigns. There shouldn't be, character assassinations. We appeal to them that they ensure that there is no violence of any sort. We want to learn on, we want to hear more of what is contained and how they hope to implement the content of their party manifestos. We want to hear from politicians on their ideologies. And to the Zambian people, we encourage them to turn up in numbers that in the August 12th election, so that they exercise their civic duty and also right to vote and choose who runs and governs the country. Also to the youth, we appeal to them that they must never allow or open themselves up to be used as tools of violence. They must demand their right space, and that space must be done in must be a positive space, a space that allows them to contribute positively to the growth of our economy. Also, that the space that allows them to grow at personal level, so that they can, be good citizens who are able to, contribute to the well-being of the country and the well-being of their families.
Well, our dear listeners, we have come towards the end of our program, and we thank you that you've been able to watch the program. I've been Patrick Soko as your host. I've been privileged to host the C Club Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Francis Chipidi. We thank you for making an appearance on this edition of The Verdict. And to our listeners and viewers out there, we thank you. We were not able to take phone calls today because of a technical challenge, but we hope tomorrow you'll be able to participate on the program. This has been Patrick Soko. Stay tuned to Kamel TV. Thank you.